Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I go over the week's events in the world of Scientology as reported on Tony's blog. Hey, Tony, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Chris, great to be back, man. What's going on?
Lots and lots. and a busy week in the world of Scientology, actually. Some pretty interesting stuff going on. Worth going over. First off, I was kind of impressed, honestly, with the release of a transcript and audio coming out of this IAS event. This was you, this was Alex. So what was the story on this one?
Yeah, so Alex, he had gotten a copy of audio of David Miscavige's Friday night speech. The IAS gala had returned to England for the first time since 2019, and it's a 3-day event. And the first night, Friday night, is when Dave gives this 3-hour speech all about the expansion of Scientology and the freedom medals and all that. And we were hoping to get some account of it or something, but Alex actually got audio, and I told him I was really interested in it, and he said, well, I'm getting a transcript. We're putting together a transcript. Do you want to publish that? I said, yeah. So really nice coordination between the two of us. And I had to, of course, to get it in my Substack, that was a lot of editing and cleaning up and stuff, but it was worth it. I really, I'm sure you too, we've been seeing these speeches, hearing them for years and years.
Yep.
And it was interesting to kind of see what this one was like. I know not everybody could get through it all. It's just so much stuff. But there were some, I was surprised by a couple of things, how heavy he put all the psychiatry stuff and loaded that up pretty early in the speech with CCHR and all that stuff. And then, of course, volunteer ministers and things. But that it seemed like the psychiatry thing was the star of the show, much more than, say, talking about the technology or the number of auditors created or anything like that. So, he's done that in the past as well, but it really seemed to me it was interesting that he had that. And then, some of the stats just seemed really kind of taken out of context, seemed weird, like 45 million materials distributed.
Right.
Well, what does that mean?
Right. Exactly.
9 million one-on-one hours from the volunteer ministers. Like, I don't know. Very odd, but in general, I would say it was classic Miscavige. Now, we knew that, previously there was a man named Dan Sherman that was his speechwriter, and he passed away about a year ago. So I was kind of curious to see if the style of the speech would change, but it really didn't. It was very much the same kind of speech. So now I'm starting to wonder if it's more Miscavige than it was ever Dan Sherman, but the same really convoluted sentences and odd sort of choice of words. David Miscavige, he has been running Scientology longer now than L. Ron Hubbard did.
That's right.
So he knows these things really, really well, but he's not an educated man, and so he's got this kind of odd way of expressing himself. But it's always got these punches. It's always got these and that's what the IS is doing in 2023. He knows where to put the applause lines and things like that. Yep. So it's an interesting mix of entertainment, trying to mesmerize the crowd, trying to hypnotize the crowd, go on, and then make a lot of claims that are, would be hard to fact check.
Exactly.
But then he also, specifically mentioned some people. And so there are some things I want to go back and look up. Scientology loves to take credit for news of any psychiatrist who gets in trouble.
Yep.
And Lynette Wagner at the Underground Bunker, she actually looked into a couple of these, and it was questionable. Like they were actually taking place earlier than this last couple of years, and it looks like Scientology had nothing to do with them. But that's the kind of thing Dave loves to take credit for. Oh, a psychiatrist got kicked out. Oh, well then it's because we are bringing such a light of exposure to psychiatry.
That's right.
So I don't know. What did you think? You've seen quite a few of these yourself.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm glad you brought up the Sherman language thing, because I was paying attention too. And And honestly, my take on it was that it actually comes across a little more convoluted for me as a looking into all the grammar and everything, right? Because I really get into that. And I thought Miscavige was doing a cheap imitation of Danny Sherman's speech writing. Trying to make these long, convoluted sentences, but you're absolutely right about the punch. He knows that, and he definitely has done this for enough years that he knows, the beats and how to move that audience. And it's an audience he's well familiar with, and he knows all he has to do is chant out paragraphs of numbers, and as long as they're really big numbers, the audience is impressed, even if they're not really getting it all themselves. And that's what happens in those things. You can't sit there for 3 hours, 2.5 hours, listening to this just like constant flow of numbers and data and high, velocity speech and think you're getting it all. You're not. It's all just kind of mantra-like after a while. So that was kind of my take on the overall of it. And I can see why they're going in on Sykes, because they really don't have a whole lot else to talk about except these inflated numbers and hype up what they can here and there. But Sykes are always, how do you, here's another point maybe. How do you unify a group? Find an enemy. Common enemy, right?
By having a common enemy, right?
That's right. And Sykes are always the go-to enemy for Scientology. So even if maybe there's a little bit of subtlety going on here, because if we were right about what we were talking about during the COVID thing with the insider talking about the conspiracy theories and this blowing up in Scientology and people leaving because they had to wear a mask and this kind of thing, maybe this is an attempt to, hey, remember, we're all on board against the Sykes kind of thing, right? So that's what I see in that.
And that when you mentioned COVID, that also reminds me another thing that he's still bragging about in 2020, late 2023, is this whole sanitation idea. That once the pandemic hit, Miscavige looked for an opportunity in it, and he thought he found it in this whole sanitation idea.
Yep.
And he had these teams, especially in South Africa, but in other countries as well, going in and cleaning police stations and things. Well, you remember the pandemic. We all remember March 2020 and how scary it was. We were all, people were all wiping down their groceries before they bought them in the house. And we didn't know. It was
That's
scary.
right.
People were dying. And then it turned out, okay, now within a few weeks, we figured out, okay, the issue is you don't want to be around somebody with COVID who's coughing or talking. You want to stay away from people. You have to wear masks.
That's right.
You're not going to get it from a surface. You're not going to get it by touching a counter, right? But 3.5 years later, he's still talking about that. Oh, we sanitized the place. We sanitized. That's got nothing to do with anything. So that was surprising to me. That shows how little they have to work with.
Yeah.
Another surprise that came out of course, is the Ideal Org program. We've been, back in January, he had claimed they would open 4 new Ideal Orgs in the first quarter of the year. Well, here it is, December. They still haven't opened anything.
Yeah.
And we all assume that the next 2 to open would be Austin and Chicago because they're both ready to go.
Yep.
But in the speech, he told us the next Ideal Org to open is in Paris. So that was a little bit of a surprise. He also had like a Narcanon, this Qual building at St. Hill, and the fourth thing he was talking about was, I think, a mission in somewhere in Italy, I think. But anyway, the point is the next he didn't even mention Chicago or Austin. He just said Paris is the next one. Right. So, I hope people over there are getting ready. It'd be nice to get some reports when that happens.
Yeah.
But that was a little bit of a surprise. But he claimed now that they're really going to start opening fast. And so maybe we will get Chicago and Austin within, a couple months. I don't know. Yeah.
It seems that they've entered a new requirement with this executive training. And they have to have their full executive structure, so to speak, go to Flag in Clearwater and do this whole hotshot training thing. I guess they get superpower and some other stuff along with it. And they're supposed to come back and be all supercharged. Talked to a guy the other day, who actually is a superpower grad, and pried him for details about the whole thing, just from the experiential point of view. And it was quite interesting how he couldn't even remember most of it, and it really made almost no impact on his life in the real world at all. Which was quite interesting. From a recent former Scientologist who had been out there.
It's just like the cause resurgence rundown and some of these other things where you've spent tens of thousands of dollars. They make it seem like it's really super, special, space age, whatever. And I'm sure as you're going through those apparatuses and touching the smell wall and, going through the oiliness table, it's like, this is incredible. My life is, and then like a week or two later, it wears off because there's nothing real going on. It's just about raising confidence and making yourself feel like you've done something great. Oh, I just spent $150,000. It's got to be worth it, And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, it's like, okay, can you still detect the saline content of your cells now?
Exactly.
It wears off.
That's right. In fact, there was another, since this is anonymous, I think I'm safe in saying this, that the other thing that was communicated to me about that is that this was somebody who had also done some of those high-powered L rundowns, right? The most expensive auditing you can get in Scientology. It's like $10,000 in intensive. And his feedback on one of those was it actually made him less empathetic and care less about people and more able to kind of run them right over. And I thought, now isn't that interesting? Because that was the exact thing L. Ron Hubbard developed for his executives. So it all starts with him. It's Miscavige is just a pale shadow of what L. Ron Hubbard was in that sense. Okay, now other stories. There's a lot here tonight. So also, like Tom Cruise, the media seems to have this thing about John Travolta. And you reported on this because his name was dropped in the speech. What was that about?
Right. So the Daily Mail earlier this year looked at flight data. They looked at, there was actually some fact they were looking at, and that was that the flight data showed that Tom Cruise had not flown his helicopter to East Grinstead in the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so the Daily Mail put a question mark on it and said, is Tom leaving Scientology? And I wrote a story in August saying this is ludicrous. If they had just bothered to ask somebody like you or Mike Rinder or Claire Headley, if Tom Cruise has not flown his helicopter to East Grinstead, does it mean he's leaving Scientology? And of course, you'd say, no, it means nothing.
That's right.
Because first of all, in the last 3 years, there's been a pandemic. Guess who's not been there? David Miscavige has not been there. So that would explain why Tom's not going. It doesn't mean he's leaving the church. So I wrote that in August. Yeah. And then November 3rd, first night of the IAS, who flew in on his helicopter? Tom Cruise. And then Saturday night, the 4th, he was all over the patrons' ball. There were lots of pictures people took of him and posted on social media. So now, no question, Tom Cruise is in the fold, very obvious. All those stories are just junk.
Yep.
Well, then the same publications came back and said, okay, but John Travolta wasn't there. Does that mean he's leaving? And I was just like, oh my God, people, he doesn't go to the IAS. I think he maybe went once in the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. So the fact that John Travolta was not there, again, means nothing. Mm-hmm. But then we got the transcript, and it turns out not only is that the case, that it's just not the kind of thing John Travolta goes to, but David Miscavige gave him a shout out in his speech. Yep. And Chris, that doesn't happen. I mean, I can't remember the last time David Miscavige actually mentioned one of the celebrities in his speech. But he had a section where he was talking about the volunteer ministers, and he said, and in Florida, John Travolta used his plane to help move, help hurricane victims or something. Yep. And I was like, well, there it is. I mean, there's no way David Miscavige would mention John Travolta if he had left Scientology. No way.
Correct.
We know Travolta's not his favorite person.
Yep.
And that Travolta is more loyal to L. Ron Hubbard than he is to David Miscavige.
Yep.
You're not going to see these two people in a room together. But still, Miscavige would not have given Travolta credit like that if Travolta was out. There's just no way.
Oh,
so
no.
again, another clear debunking. Tom Cruise and John Travolta are very much in the fold. And I just wanted to remind people a little bit how deeply they're into it. There's this idea in the public that people like Cruise and Travolta are only in Scientology because they don't dare leave because they'll be blackmailed.
Right.
And that's just not it. Of course, there's that consideration for anybody who decides to leave. But, Tom Cruise really, truly believes, John Travolta really, truly believes that L. Ron Hubbard was the greatest human being who ever lived.
Correct.
And that only Scientology is going to save this planet from its prison status.
That's right. That's exactly
and
right.
once you buy into that, it's so powerful. You don't just walk away. So I'm going to need some really good evidence
Yeah,
that
exactly.
either one of these guys have left. And what was presented to us in these recent weeks was not evidence at all. And now we have evidence, very real evidence. Tom's presence there, and Miscavige naming John Travolta. Now solid evidence they're both in, and if you're going to try to convince me they've left, you better have a really good set of evidence.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I can speak to the fact that in the 80s, John Travolta was out and they got him back. And in the late 90s, I don't know that Tom Cruise was, all the way in anymore. I think Nicole was successfully pulling him out, and then they sent Marty in. They send people in. They send people who are trusted, who are trained, who can put these guys on an e-meter, who can impress them, who can dazzle them with the tech. And when they're true believers, like Cruise, like Travolta, they respond to L. Ron Hubbard's words. It means something to them. And they got Travolta back. And he's been back ever since. And I'll tell you, Kelly...
It happened again later, too, because Travolta himself, in an interview, said that after Jet died, which was like, 99 or something like that, after Jet died, they moved these auditors into their house for 2 years.
Damn.
And again, this was Travolta himself in an interview, and he was, it was 2009, not 1999.
Oh, yeah.
2009, Jet died.
Okay.
And then, like I said, Travolta gave an interview. It was a legit interview, too. It wasn't like Freedom Magazine or something. And he said, and he was saying it, Chris, to say how wonderful it was of the church to help them this way by actually moving auditors into their house so that they were there 24 hours a day to help John and Kelly after Jet died. Yep. Well, of course, we look at that like they were there to make sure John didn't run.
Exactly. And Kelly, I mean, again, I was kind of there when he got Kelly in, and she took to it. I mean, she really took to it. And so together, John had his family, and there's no question. I mean, met the man. He is seriously, I've always said, nicest guy, most well-intentioned man. There's nothing like insane to him, like, the power trips that Cruise can go on. But I think if there was any, over these years, if there were any hesitations or doubts on John's part, Kelly was the one to keep him going. And then when the tragedy struck and they bring auditors in full time for 2 years, that's a lot. That's a lot. Even for Scientology celebrities, that's a lot. So they really got the full treatment to keep them going on this. And it looks like it worked because you're absolutely right. There is zero chance that John Travolta's name is coming out of David Miscavige's mouth if Miscavige has a problem with John, and it looks like he doesn't anymore. It was years ago that he had that problem with the whole Battlefield Earth fiasco.
I don't think Travolta will ever be his favorite or anything, but it is significant that he mentioned him.
Exactly.
And, I think we need to consider that real evidence that Travolta's still in.
Absolutely. I agree completely. Okay, now this was interesting to me. This was out of the blue. This Canadian undercover documentary, 3 months. What was this story?
So Gaetan Pouliot, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, is somebody I've known for a couple of years. He and I have traded information about things. He's looked into Scientology before in Canada, done some real good work. And in this case, they had somebody pose as a man who was getting treatment for bipolar condition by a psychiatrist, and what would happen if they sent him in to get help at the Scientology org. I'm not all that big a fan of undercover stuff like this,
Mm.
but what I liked about this investigation was they put the focus on the fact that Scientology is practicing mental health care without a license.
That's right.
And not only were they encouraging this man to stop taking his medication without telling his doctor about it, but to replace it with this vitamin bomb that Gaetan found out. Well, first of all, they sent him to a mechanic at a car repair place
Right.
who was their vitamin guy. And then this vitamin bomb that he acquired for him were vitamins that were not approved to be used in Canada. And the thing about this investigation is that I think the Canadian government is possibly more likely to do something about this than the American government. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just the American government. It's just like with especially with the FDA and stuff like that. It just doesn't seem like they're very vigilant. But the Canadian government takes this kind of stuff a little more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing what else they can do with this. But Phil Jones watched it for us. He's up there in Canada, and Gitan himself put a transcript up so that we could see exactly how it went down. But I thought it was a very enterprising job they did. They brought in some experts to talk about what was happening, and I don't know, just really really concerning stuff about how Scientology uh, again is interfering with a person's serious mental health issues.
That's right. That's exactly right. It was funny because in Canada, when we did that Going Clear conference years ago, that was where I first was briefed by a actual PhD level biochemist who did a whole rundown on that purification rundown program, their detox program. And I was particularly happy about this particular undercover doc because it wasn't just the usual, oh, I went in and did Scientology's personality test and here's why it was bullshit, right? I hate those things. They're such low-hanging fruit at this point. But this was a 3-month undercover with cameras. Let's go in there. They confronted the doctor who was giving people okays in the write-up, and he was like, "Oh, whoa! I didn't know. This is bad for people." Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. You're the doctor. You're the one who's supposed to figure that out. So I thought they busted him quite well, and I thought that was among the most important of the reveals because it shows these guys are delivering a program of 5 hours in a sauna and a two handfuls of vitamins and supplements. This is physically dangerous for people. This isn't helping them. This isn't detoxing them. It's actually could kill them, and it has. So, we need to, let's just say that there have been deaths related to this program. Let me put it that way. And it's not good, right? And we've seen reporting on that over the years. So that's why I was happy to see this thing exposed the way it was, because now the French Canadian citizens know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, good. Hats off to Gaetan. He pulled off a great operation.
Yeah, big time. Okay, now legal updates. So Leah's lawsuit, and this is the big one. This is the one that I am really following like super closely because it's just packs a punch and it just keeps coming. So what happened this week on it? A couple things, yeah.
Right. So she filed her lawsuit in August, and she amended it, saying that things were even worse after they filed the lawsuit. She also moved for a preliminary injunction to stop Scientology and its harassment. This is a fair game lawsuit. She's going after them for all of the online harassment they've been doing to her, online and in real life.
Yep.
And we were wondering how Scientology was going to respond. Scientology came back hard. They came back with a motion to basically gut her lawsuit and pull a bunch of stuff out of it. And it came with more than 1,000 pages of exhibits.
Wow.
And it was essentially Scientology saying, yeah, we're calling Leah names, but you know what? She called us names first. This is a free speech fight. That's all it is. This is a frivolous lawsuit. Get rid of it, Judge.
Yeah.
So now we have Leah's response to that.
Mhm.
And I got to tell you, she's got a couple of really good attorneys. They put together this hard hitting, it's called an opposition to the motion to strike. And they reiterated a lot of the same things, but they're talking about how this is not just a free speech, fight, a war of words. There is conduct here, conduct by the Church of Scientology to try to harm Leah Remini at every juncture and with a lot of lies. And that yes, she is a public person to a certain extent, but that she's should still have protection from the kinds of operations they're trying to run against her with a lot of so for example, one example that we've heard over and over again for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years was this awful death in Australia involving a 16-year-old boy who knifed a Scientology security guard at the new advanced org, which is just outside Sydney, which Scientology immediately blamed on Leah and
Yep.
said that I can still remember they would put up these videos, Leah Remini has blood on her hands, claiming that this 16-year-old had killed the security guard because he was motivated by Leah's show.
Mhm.
And now Leah's attorneys have really dug into that. And they've got some new documents. I'm going to be diving into those, I think, later this week as well. But they explained at length in this briefing about how there's absolutely no connection whatsoever. And anything that suggests Leah was all invented by Scientology. So they're not. So Scientology may come back with these, just really hard, motions and stuff. But man, Leah's attorneys are ready for it. They've got the details, and I don't know. I just found it really inspiring. And they filed 1,000 pages worth of exhibits. She came back with almost 700 herself.
Yeah.
So just a real amazing battle going on.
Yep.
And I just find it really fascinating that she has been through. We're learning more and more about just the extent of what she's had to deal with
Yeah.
these last 10 years now since she came out.
And it's been rough for her and for Mike and for people connected with them, because it's not just them, it's the family. It's, there's so much you don't see about what goes on behind the scenes with this stuff. And when you have people, publicly and privately, whether it's OSA or, private people or whatever, coming after you like that and coming after your livelihood and coming after your income and coming after, your very ability to survive, that is not free speech. That is not what that's about. Free speech was never about ruining people utterly. And that's what Scientology is basically trying to argue. Now, interestingly, there was a sub bit to this with Kendrick Moxon, a very infamous Scientologist and attorney who's carried water for Scientology for decades, getting caught. And this is getting caught in exactly this thing with Leah. What was this about?
So, like I said, along with their answer to Scientology's motion, they've included all these pages of exhibits and examples of things. And in there is this 7-page transcript of a hearing from April in a criminal case. And I'm still getting some details about it, but essentially what happened was there's this guy named Armando Garcia. He's got some issue with the Church of Scientology. I was told that he has actually leafleted the area in the past. I don't know, what those leaflets said or anything, but apparently he's got some kind of issue with Scientology. And at this point, one night in May 2022, he was passing out flyers or something, and a security guard on L. Ron Hubbard Way told him, "You're littering, you need to get out of here," whatever the issue was. And so this guy got in his car and needed to turn around and was doing the back and forth thing. And on one of those things was aimed right at the security guard.
Mm.
So Scientology saw an opportunity, I think, and had him arrested, saying he tried to run us over with his car.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the public defender, you can tell from the transcript, thinks this is all overblown,
Mm-hmm.
that, this is not what happened. But the guy did have a criminal history. And I think that's possibly why the DA's office took it seriously. And so he was looking at a felony for attempt, assault with a deadly weapon,
Yep.
the deadly weapon being the car.
Right.
And he was arrested in May 2022. Apparently he's, I don't know if he's indigent or whatever, but like I said, he had a criminal past. And so he was in jail for almost a year, Chris. He was in jail.
Couldn't believe that when I read that.
Waiting for the trial. And so then the following April, this past April 2023, they're getting ready for jury selection and a trial. And at some point, the judge says to Kendrick Moxon, and Moxon is there representing what he says is the victims, the security guard in the church. And the judge immediately corrects him. There's only one victim here, the security guard. The Church of Scientology is not a victim in this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But okay, he's here representing the church. He's here representing the security guard. The judge informs him, I'm going to have to kick you out of the courtroom. Why? Because Kendrick Moxon's a potential witness. Why is Kendrick Moxon a potential witness? And real quick, Moxon is, we've seen, if you listen to Chris Shelton's videos or read Tony Ortega's blog, there's various flavors of Scientology attorney, from Monique Yingling, the DC tax attorney, to Jeffrey Riffer, the very colorful personal attorney for David Miscavige. But this is a different animal. Kendrick Moxon is a Sea Org member. He was a Guardian's Office guy. This is a billion-year contract guy who's in-house Scientology counsel, and I don't think he makes very much money. This guy is a creature of Scientology, and to the point where he goes back, he was an unindicted co-conspirator in the Snow White prosecutions in the late 70s.
Yeah, that's
how far back this guy goes.
Yeah.
Doing Scientology's more unsavory things. I wrote about him trying to convince a guy to go to make up shit about Graham Barry. In 1999, I think I wrote that story, 24 years ago.
Jesus.
So long known, this guy he'll do anything for Scientology.
Yeah.
So why is Kendrick Moxon being told he's going to be kicked out of court? So the judge asks the public defender to explain the situation. And that's in this transcript. The public defender says that during this time when the guy's been in jail, Armando's been in jail, Moxon's been approaching his public defender saying, look, if your client will just say that he was motivated to run over our security guard by watching Leah Remini's show, we'll get it knocked down to a misdemeanor, or maybe even less. Mm-hmm. And oh my God, the attorney's just saying this outright, that basically Moxon has been caught suborning perjury, trying to get this guy to say something that's not true. In response, in return, he'll get the charges knocked down, which he's not in a position to do. It's the DA that decides whether to charge him for a felony or a misdemeanor.
Yep.
So it's just absolutely outrageous. Now, I'm told by my source at the court that at that point, the judge then called people into his chambers, watched the video of the actual incident, and then knocked it down to a misdemeanor, and Armando got a year's probation. So I think this helped educate the judge that Scientology was pushing something that wasn't there.
Yeah.
But anyway, and I'm trying to get more hard information on that, but I did check. The court record does show he was given the credit for the time he was in jail, and then he was sentenced to a year probation. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about this. I think there's some big news organizations that are working on this. It's serious stuff. I mean, Moxon was caught red-handed trying to, interfere in this criminal case. And why? Just so they have some more material to hit Leah Remini with.
That's right.
And so Leah's attorneys included this as an example of how this isn't just a war of words. This is Scientology literally running these crazy operations to try to destroy her on stuff that isn't true.
Exactly. And this is what they do. This is literally, you wonder, what is OSA doing all day? This is what they're doing all day. You look at the service staff and the Scientology orgs, they're sitting around writing letters. They're trying to sell books. They're trying to bring people in. They're doing busy work, right? They're really doing jack all. And the numbers show that they're doing jack all. But the real work in Scientology gets done by these guys. And this is the work they're doing. And they're doing it all day. And they don't have anything else to do all day but this crap, which is why it can be so hard for regular folks who have jobs and families and lives to fight back against this. You know, you don't have time for this crap. You're not one-on-one, you know, at war with these people, but they're at war with you if you're Leah or Mike or you or, you know, all of us. So it needs to be understood. This is, you know, we laugh at them, we ridicule them, and we should, but at the same time, they can be formidable and they can be incredibly sneaky. And I love the fact that Moxon got kind of busted on this one. So we'll see how this progresses, because it's really only just getting going, I think.
It's only getting going, and you know, I just got those documents Friday, and they just filed them Friday, and
Right.
and so I think we're going to be hearing about more repercussions on that, and you know, I'll be looking, and like I said, I think some of the news organizations are looking around in that, so I think we're going to get more detail, and you know, I think Leah's lawsuit is really bad news for Scientology, and they're flailing a little bit. But, you know, as always, Chris, we just don't know with these judges.
That's right.
Just don't know if this is going to press. Because I look at those, I pour through these court documents. They're so long. And I'm looking at the incredible detail they go into about some of this stuff. And I think, is the judge really going to dive into all this? I don't know. We'll see. I mean,
Supposed
this
to.
judge, we're not sure. We're not quite sure yet.
Yeah.
So, but that's going to be, that's all for a hearing. January 9th, I believe, is the date. So a little more than a month from now. That should be a very interesting hearing.
Big time. I'm really looking forward to that. This is the one I'm super interested in, and one of the reasons for it is because you've commented a couple of times now, and I've been saying this for a long time. You need quality attorneys. You need people who really know what they're doing and who interpret the law so that the judge goes, "Oh, right, yeah." You know, like that's what you're paying for. And Leah really seems to have brought a good team here who really do get what they're doing and get what their job is. And it's not just about the paycheck, it's get the work done. And those details are important. At least that's what lawyers tell me. When you file generalities, the Scientology can just swim right through them. But you detail. And as far as I know, the courts at least are supposed to go through all that material. So we'll see. But you're right. It's all about the judges. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up then. I wanted to remind everybody that I am off for December. So this show is the one that's continuing, right? Every Monday we're going to be doing this. But my other content is on hold right now. And I'm kind of taking some time and regrouping and figuring some things out for the new year so I can hit the ground running. And that's all happening. So, Tony, do you have any previews or anything you want to drop for this coming week?
Well, I'm going to be going through some more of those court documents. I think there's some stuff in it that there's so much, but you know, I think there's some important things we're going to be looking at. And hey, this week is Lisa McPherson week. The 28th anniversary of her death is on Tuesday, I think.
Okay.
And or Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever the 5th is. Anyway, oh no, it's Tuesday. So we're gonna observe that as we always do. And our end of the year roundup is rapidly approaching. I can't believe I got to get ready for that again. Oh,
that's right. Goodness. I forgot you do that every year. That's right. Yeah, you got some work ahead of you.
I got a lot of work ahead of me. All right. I'm glad you're getting some time off. You deserve it, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, folks. Thanks for coming around and watching. I got to tell you, we really appreciate your viewership and your support. We really do. And keep it coming and keep watching because the news is here and we're happy to give it to you. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.